Hello and welcome to Dialogue. In the first summer since COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, Chinese audiences are back again in the theaters. By the beginning of August, the summer box office revenue in the Chinese mainland already hit 14 billion yuan and is likely to reach 40 billion for the year. Is China's film market back to pre-pandemic levels? What features this year's summer film season? And what can we say about China's film industry today and its future? To talk more about China's film market and the industry, I'm glad to be joined by Professor Teng Jimeng, a regular film critic, David Moser, associate professor at the Beijing Capital Normal University, Digby Wren, media and communications specialist. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue. So there have been multiple movies available in the Chinese theaters with different subjects, different genres. So Jimeng, I will start with you. How do you characterize this year's summer movie season?
Well, I think 2023 has been a year in which that we see this Chinese cinema industry rolling back to normal. I mean, this is basically business back to normal with so much blockbusters coming back on the big screen. I mean, once again, we can see right now moviegoers flocking back into movie theaters and watch these both domestically made film productions as well as foreign imports. Mission Impossible is back in China. I mean, even Barbie here is in China. And once again, the whole audience is looking forward to this very history feature, this very Oppenheimer film about the Second World War, about the making of the atomic bomb. So I would predict that this is coming, the business is coming back, and then a second wave since the New Year festival film-going wave is coming back.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, right now you can see in the movie theaters, what dominance are really made in China movies right now. King of Storms, Chang'an, Never Say Never, etc. And with different genres and different, let's say, subjects there.
Mm-hmm. Well, China has an enormous movie audience. So if a film is successful in China, then that's quite enough to make quite a profit. So the movie producers don't need to worry about international reception of the film. But yeah, of course, there is a move, and I think it's partly on the part of the producers, but also partly in terms of, the government would like to see more China themed movies. And the success of the Battle of Lake Changjin, was I don't know if it was a surprise, but to me, I was amazed. It was one of the top grossing films of all time. And now you have, for example, this new animated film about the life of Li Bai that has the Tang poetry and everything. I was a little doubtful that would draw many people to the theaters, but I saw it, and it's actually quite entertaining, and the animation is top notch. And the people that I talked to, and the people in the theater seemed to enjoy it. And the people that I talked to said that they thought it was one of the best movies they'd seen for a long time. So I think the Chinese themed movies have got a lot of box office possibilities here. And the question now is, can they go international? Can the films play overseas? But right now they're doing so well at the local box office. And by the way, post COVID, I think people were so sort of hungry for that movie theater experience, because they've been watching streaming movies like crazy during COVID. It's not that they stopped watching movies during COVID, but they missed that in the theater experience. And I think that's another reason people are flocking back to the theater.
It's like a revenge, Digby.
Yeah, people are so happy to go back to the cinemas, and as our previous guest just pointed out, China has such a large market. The question for box office in China now is, can that be extended overseas? So of course it can be done in the way that there's always, like in Cambodia, there's a big market for Chinese films, Thailand and so forth, and Singapore, they love that too. And there's very large populations of Chinese and fans of Chinese films all around the world. So but connecting to them with real content that works for them, other than just the standard kind of traditional Hong Kong woo-fu and all that sort of stuff, wuxia. That's going to be a challenge. And yeah, that the film about the Korean War was such a big success. That was quite a surprise. So I think that all of the genres of films are now being mastered in China and ready for export. I think that's going to be a trend.
Mm-hmm. Well, before taking on the overseas market, Jimeng, obviously, the first step is really the success at home market. And if you look at the subjects and the genre, you know, as an ordinary Chinese, as a moviegoer, I'm myself very much impressed with the diversity. For example, you do see Lost in the Stars, is a suspense crime, and The Kingdom of Storms, you know, this fantasy film and drama, and also I think of just recently released the sci-fi adventure Meg 2, The Trench, you know, featuring Wu Jing. The diversity is amazing to see that. There's more than coming back, you know, from the COVID. There's something, you know, giving people the high hope that the Chinese film industry is booming, actually.
I agree, yes. I think it is not just simply coming back of Chinese cinema. I think it's almost like a great leap forward movement. This is a great move in terms of the technological advance and also the upgrading of the movie theaters, as well as the kind of uplifting and also improvement on the part of the actors and actresses. I mean, the whole performance, the whole army of performing artists here in China. And think about Meg 2, for example. This great kind of a team headed by Wu Jing, joining Jason Stanson. In fact, they are actually working internationally since the first one. In this case, I think that the Chinese performing artists are also, in a sense, quickly catching up with not just the language side of it, but also in terms of the acting, the skills, and also the kind of the interactive skills with international stars and the industry. In a sense, I see great hope on the part of the actors and actresses, and also in terms of technology. I mean, this time around, the IMAX has been widely available on big screens here in movie theaters across China. There's kind of a tremendous amount increase in terms of numbers of IMAX theaters here in China over the past 3 years, or maybe 4 years since 2019. And back to the first point, I think is a great leap forward movement. It's in terms of also movie investment. Investment also are accumulating in this regard in terms of investors joining hands with state-owned film corporations, kind of like inputting this money into or pumping money into this very industry so that the technology can be improved. And then take Wu Shan's The Creation of Gods. I mean, all the special effects were actually kind of supported by this huge financial supports by international and Chinese investors, especially Chinese investors. And besides, the Chinese government, Chinese culture industry authorities are also kind of investing heavily, not just in terms of energy, human resources, but also this money, this finance thing, I mean, into this industry. So I see three forces at work in making this great movement possible.
So David, do you agree? So there's the investment, there's a filmmaking technology, there's international cooperation, of course, the content creation too.
Of course, you know, they're all factors. The film industry has matured a great deal, and I would say, you know, it's a process of learning. The Chinese film industry has gone from making very Chinese films that were sort of based on Chinese. The fifth generation and the sixth generation were making very Chinese films that had to do with Chinese culture and Chinese history, on low budgets mostly, and they were sort of art house films. They weren't really meant to be Hollywood blockbusters. Over the years, it's interesting to see the Chinese film industry sort of learn how to do these genres. So you have, you know, the spy movie, the detective movies, the love stories, the screwball comedies, and how to do animation, you know, full screen animation very well. All these things that they've learned over the years to do the special effects techniques and the storytelling techniques of these genres. They've mastered that very well. Not just in film, in the TV series too, are extremely high quality, up to any standard I've seen anywhere in the world. So right now, there's a sort of a threshold, a lower threshold, because the technology, especially for special effects, is nothing new. It's now standard practice. The sorts of techniques and sort of special effects equipment and software that they use now is basically the same worldwide, so they can reach those same special effects standards in the movies. So they've matured now, and they're able to do all of those different genres. They know how to do it, and they know how to fill a theater and how to satisfy audiences. And now they can just start making good films. They have to just get the actors, get the scripts, and start making experiments and see what works with the Chinese audience.
Digby, so what do you think are the factors contributed to the success or the popularity of these movies, like Creation of God, the Kingdom of Storms, Never Say Never, like Chang'an? Many of them are based on the Chinese history, the Chinese culture.
Yes, well, a little part of my history that nobody knows is that when I was very young, I was in New York and I was hired as a script appraisal expert. And that meant they sent me scripts to look at, and then I would write a little report about the script saying whether or not I thought it was exploitative or, purely action oriented, or whether the scenes made sense logically and all that sort of thing. And so this pointing to the key factor here is the convergence of all of the mastery of, having better screens, knowing how to publicize the movies, having all the technology, all of that. But the key thing is always the story. And I think what we see here is that the Chinese cinema is now drawing on stories much more. There's such a rich repository of stories in China, in its history, in its culture, and being produced in sci-fi, for example, and new ways to look at the stories. And that is in contrast very much to the cinema that's coming from America, where it's really, we're into speed, Cars number 10 and Mission Impossible 7, and it's the same story over and over, and Marvel Studios and superheroes. And I think that there's a sort of certain fatigue to that, and China is offering something that's different, but technically really very, very good, and the stories are deep and well constructed, and have a key message that is appreciated by all audiences, not just Chinese audiences. And I think that's the real difference here, is the convergence of all of these things around really good storytelling.
I mean, given this cultural similarity, or say the popularity of the Chinese the history, many people probably, for example, in the Southeast Asian countries, already know the names. For example, the immortal poet Li Bai, or the Creation of God, the Kingdom of Storms. Many of the names are household names. So can we say it's easier probably for people to welcome or to love to enjoy the Chinese movies?
I think so. Definitely, I've noticed, for example, I've noticed that on YouTube, which is very, very popular in Southeast Asia. I also have iQIYI, for example, on my smart TV, and other access to Chinese films. These are very, very popular, and there has been more and more Chinese films available, and I mean really noticeably more. And noticeably less American films, which is quite a sort of interesting phenomena, and that was true in Malaysia, that was true in Indonesia, that's true in Cambodia. And I just want to sort of reflect on the idea too that you've got films being made in other countries that are now starting to include themes, tropes, references to China and Chinese influence, obviously in martial arts, but in many, many other ways. And I think it's just becoming a cultural norm around the world. And so part of this is the idea now that Chinese filmmakers are also introducing from Korea, from Japan, from Europe, from Africa, from South America, from all sources. And that's improving their filmmaking. And there's a huge network of award ceremonies and festivals and things like that at all levels, for art house, for independence, for very low budgets, for big budgets, for, you know, all that sort of thing. And China needs to be more involved in that. Previously, there's only been sort of like one Chinese film or two Chinese films and, you know, a handful of professionals at these events. I think that needs to change. I think there needs to be much more Chinese presence more widely in all of these kinds of events and award ceremonies and festivals and so forth, and more representation, because the volume of production is there. There's a lot of production. And of course, the more production there is, the more good stuff there's going to be. And I think China needs to take advantage of that. And yes, it can draw on new treatments of all of these wonderful, old, traditional, cultural mythology. And of course, technology always helps with those kind of old style or mythological stuff where people have to fly and things like that. So I think there's a huge opportunity here. And yeah, it needs to be done in a more I think the cooperation between the private investment and the government studios and so forth can really spur that along in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jimeng, so what's the next step for the Chinese movies? You know, as Digby mentioned, you need more productions, you know, more productions, and then, of course, you know, among those productions, you have more chances of producing top quality movies. And I think the popularity or success in the Chinese market probably is their first step before you go overseas. I mean, if you are not well liked in the home market, I mean, it's difficult for you to be enjoyed or liked in another country.
Well, take Chang'an, for example. I think Chang'an is a case in point in terms of international cooperation and collaboration among filmmakers across the board. Chang'an actually is a theme that features this great cosmopolitan dynasty when Li Bai, this guy born in Xinjiang and traveling across the continent into the central inland and eastern China, and writing poetry, making friends, and actually kind of professing the greatness of the art of Chinese poetry writing. And so we need to focus on a kind of international oriented and a international theme oriented by joining China, by incorporating China into this kind of a storytelling that face not just domestic audiences, but perhaps audiences across the world. China now is powerful enough, both in terms of the finance and film technology and production technology and director side of this industry. China actually had the strong army of this sort of creative force. China actually is the only country in the world actually has still have studios backed by state finance and also private financing in making film. I mean, the multiple channels in getting financing to make film is unique in this Chinese kind of sense of filmmaking. And so what I'm thinking right now is, since we have this the new Silk Road project, this One Belt, One Road kind of initiative, why don't we just use this initiative and introduce Chinese theme, but then combined with international material and strike up this very connection or a network, joining China with the rest of the world, starting from Central Asia and into East Asia, and then use perhaps the most important hub country, Turkey, into Europe, and then out there in the East, the Pacific Ocean, try to reach out to South Korea, Japan, and the United States in North America, and set up this kind of alliance. I mean, look at Chinese filmmakers working and collaborating and showcasing their films in international film festivals. I've been traveling to film festivals like Toronto Film Festivals, Seattle Film Festivals, which is close to Portland, and these are great venues for Chinese and international filmmakers work together. I mean, talk about projects, pitching their projects by joining hands to make film a kind of a global entertainment form. Right now, I think China is facing a sort of threat. I think this kind of saturation, movie saturation. I mean, domestic production saturation. Look at the internet; there are huge and tons of these short movies, documentaries, and stuff like that. And they are so very homogeneous. And so right now, I think that we need to reach out and look for different materials and try to learn and try to share and try to, in a sense, work together as one big family.
Well, it's almost like a globalization of movies. The other side of the story, David, is of course, movies from other markets, other countries, their performance in China, in the China market. For example, this year we have a couple of them. People would say they are underperforming, like Indiana Jones, Mission Impossible. But you do have Barbie, for example, which is popular, and in particular among the feminists, let's say. There's a media coverage, positive coverage, and then people are flocking to the theater. So, it's combined. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I think as Digby said, there's a kind of fatigue with the things like with franchises like Mission Impossible and the superheroes. People have seen it so much that there's nothing novel in it. But this going back and forth with China promoting Chinese themes overseas and also using Chinese themes to sell within China. We have lots of examples of this kind of a failure that has to do with the market considerations. The Disney attempt to create the Mulan update, and they put very much care into that and lots of thought and lots of vetting, and it just flopped in the Chinese market. It was absolutely a disaster. So that was an attempt they made, and it was in good faith. I think they were trying to, of course, they were trying to make lots of money off of it. So they put a lot of effort into it. It didn't work. You have phenomenon like if you remember the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was really popular overseas. My brother teaches film at Mass College of Art, and his students were just blown away by that movie. They'd never seen, because for them, the way of doing the martial arts fighting and things was unfamiliar to the American audiences. And when they saw it on the big screen, they were just fascinated and dazed by it. But it didn't play well in China. In the mainland China, the viewers didn't really like it. And so you have these kind of miscalculations going on. It's not going to succeed in every case. That these things don't always export. The animated film, from a few years ago, Ne Zha, the boy demon. Okay, the animation was absolutely flawless. It was amazing. It was fantastic. It was innovative. Why did it not catch on and get more play overseas? Why did overseas audiences, and especially children, it was maybe too culturally embedded, and the main character, the boy, the Ne Zha character, was not felt as a sympathetic character by overseas audience. He seemed like an angry bully, sort of.
Right.
So this is a cute kid. How can we, but it was more faithful than the Disney version would have been to the actual original story, right? So these are all tricky things. You can't just put a lot of money into it and have lots of flashy special effects and have it succeed. There's very subtle nuances there that you have to experiment with, right?
Yeah.
But I think what Digby said something earlier. I think one important thing for whatever film you do and however you want to do it, the main point is the characters and the story. I mean, the characters have to be sympathetic. Why did Disney steal China's soft power tools for Kung Fu Panda? It had wushu, and it had pandas, and it had dragons and everything. And it was very popular overseas everywhere, and it was also popular in China because the characters were cute and lovable and funny, even in translation, right?
Something universal, yeah.
It was very universal, and the sort of bumbling idiot and everything, those characters are funny in any language, right? So it is possible to do it, but it's tricky, and it's not just a matter of money and technique and special effects.
Good point. So Digby, I mean, there are, let's say, challenges, if not the risks, going overseas. I mean, for any movies because of the cultural differences or nuances of there.
Yeah, look, the first thing to remember is that if you do have a large and successful home market like China does, well, then you've got a financial base and a production base with all of the tools and all of the resources that you need to have a high level of production. And you've also got a very large repository of stories and themes that can be used. And many of those, I think, are very universal in real terms when it comes to comes to characters having, the basic feelings that they share and situations that they're put into. And so that's all there. And so if you've got that resource at home, which China now really does, and it's matched with all of the technical and the financial, then overseas export market is the way to go. I think that's fairly obvious. But, you have to remember that Nigeria has a very successful film business, Bollywood, of course, Tollywood, we've all heard of those, Brazil and all those places. So I think going back, if China really wants to expand into its export, I mean, it really needs to work with those foreign producers as well. And it could be just in terms of finance and technique or production. And for example, in animation, China has got fabulous animation studios. And give them opportunity to tell their stories, but have a production provided by China, finance provided by China, access to the Chinese screens, and sort of follow the trend of the world. It's not all about the United States and French cinema or German cinema. It's about African cinema, Central Africa, North Africa, about this, the Middle East, and it's about South America and Mexico and Central America. They all have very specific film genres and approaches, and I think China needs to mix it up with them a little bit.
Well, thank you. Many thanks to Jimeng, David, and Digby. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qianduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.